or are there other things, you know, like resilience, risk aversion, adaptability that we also need to consider, and then we need to take that to the wider community and sell that message?
Well, that's
I rambled on a bit there, sorry.
No, it's very interesting, and you know, you're living and breathing in a situation that that is obviously untenable in some very ways, because you have a government that is fast tracking this notion that they will have a deal by dealing with a very bad situation going on right now. And I can feel you, because of course, for those of you that don't know, I am both a dual citizen of the UK and Australia, and my family is in the UK right now. So they are living through it right now, and it's not a good situation. In terms of this notion of fast tracking Brexit and all of this, one of the things that came up when we ran this session with Dr. Hanfield earlier, who I know you know very well from a US perspective, that we were talking about was this real need to maybe look at regionalization of supply chains. And that actually opens up a real kind of quandary for the UK, because regionalization would normally be, integration into the EU. You know, you look locally, you look to your closer neighbors. And if we are coming out of this in a way in which we're going to look at those more regionalized supply chains, what does that mean for the UK, who has just basically moved itself apart from its closest partner at a regional level?
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting, because we've, over the last sort of decade or two, we've not been great in the UK in investing in education. And you have, you know, we have two options. Is one, we invest and become a high value add country like Germany, but that takes a long time. Or we join the race to the bottom and become the cheap producer, where, as we know, lots of organizations will buy on price. And in the short term, that's a quick solution. You know, you cut your business rates, you don't spend money through government on the social systems, and you know, you don't invest in people's pensions. They have to look after themselves, which we've sort of started going down. But yes, so, you know, the UK cannot become self-sufficient in every area. It will be dependent on other areas. And so we have to be connected, and robustly connected, not just connected through contracts, you know, connected in terms of influencing where laws go, where the you know, strategy goes for our region. Europe is very clear; they are not going to allow the UK to have free access to its markets and become a low-cost producer and simply suck out large amounts of manufacturing and service into the UK because we're cheaper. And they say that the reason they won't do that, which they've allowed in other parts, is because of the regionalisation. We're too close to mainland Europe. It's too easy to do it. So whilst there's the issue of how do we deal with all these things, ultimately, and bringing it back to the COVID issue and, you know, what's going to happen as we go forward, vested interests are still going to dominate America, and rightly so. Why wouldn't they? Britain is trying to look after Britain. Europe is trying to look after the integrity of Europe. It's obviously understands, you know, and during the downturn, 2008 and above, we saw the fractures starting to appear there. What was very interesting, given my background with Germany, was the embarrassment of the German government, almost, of how well they were doing over the last decade or two, when countries like Greece were literally falling apart, and the southern European countries, and hence their willingness to give them huge grants and financial support. You know, Europe is not perfect, neither is the rest of the world. But if you recognize it, it's something you can deal with. It's like with our global trade. If we can analyze, understand things, then we can deal with them. But it's going to be a difficult situation, made far worse by COVID on the one hand, because it's had such a detrimental effect on people. But on the other hand, it almost starts to wipe the slate clean and gets people's psychology thinking, what could we do differently, rather than let's rebuild what we had. And our propensity as human beings is risk aversion. And so we tend to rebuild. Hopefully, governments will take the view now of actually we need to do something different, because the impact on our populations has been so big, so detrimental, and we've done the best we can, that we can't go this way again.
Well, I would agree with you on that, because I think in some ways what it is exposing, and I think we have discussed this before, we've discussed it with Robert in the US, is that we are going to re-enter a new era of how we reimagine global trade and global supply chains. There's absolutely nothing that can hold us back from looking at that, because it's just going to change everything. I mean, my concern is that I don't want countries to retreat to protectionist measures that self-isolate, and that really concerns me, because, you know, I'm looking at some reports out of Japan today where their government is offering stimulus packages to ensure that they can bring manufacturing back on shore. You know, this is going to be something that I think is quite alarming, that if we see stimulus packages like that, what I get concerned about is that disadvantages then the micro to small to medium enterprises, and particularly those that are based in least developing countries, from entering into the opportunity of getting into value chains. And that is like a lifeline for them. And most backbones of most economies are small to medium enterprises. Most of them are. And then when you add that into their ability to also get access into global value chains, that's incredibly important. So protectionism is not the answer. And we need to look at what that means going forward. So from your perspective, what do you think it means for what we need to look at from a political perspective? And then I will ask you about a practical perspective.
Yeah, the politics is interesting. In February, I went down to Whitehall, which is basically where our UK government is based, and was talking to them about some of the things I do. And the response was, this is really, really interesting. We want to do this, but you're a small business. You're going to have to partner with one of the big players. Otherwise, we just won't be able to get you in. Now, on the back of that, I was looking at their target of using 30% SMEs. Now, the British government, basically what they do is they look at their big suppliers, so whether they be the consultancy firms, whether they be the service providers like Babcock or Serco in the past, etc. And what they're doing to count their 30% is they're counting the small and medium enterprises that their suppliers use as part of their own 30%. And that's how they're getting around the figure, which is, yeah, okay, you could say, yeah, I get it, but it's not exactly in the spirit of what they espouse to the rest of us. So that's the one piece. The biggest barrier, I think, is the amount of bureaucracy that exists in government. Although government is there to serve the people as well, there are huge vested interests that dominate what happens in government. If there weren't, we wouldn't have lobby groups, but we do, who prowl the corridors, pouncing on whoever they think can further their own causes. The thing is, we know nothing about these. There's no transparency. So understanding what that means for SMEs and for actually building a resilient global supply chain, it's unknown. And the problem is it flexes and changes with every political party. So as most people would know, in the UK, we have effectively a two-party state. So we elect people every 5 years. So potentially every 5 years, what a government will do is spend the first couple of years undoing what the previous government did that it doesn't like, and then rebuilding what it does want to do. And then the next one comes in, spends 2 years unpacking what's been done, and then rebuilding what it wants. And we just seesaw left to right, left to right, left to right as we go along. We've had 10 years of austerity, and now we've just had this massive giveaway. And, you know, all these things are going to be built in the north, because the north of England typically doesn't vote for a Conservative government, but it did this time. So now they're going to get something back. What was the point of the previous 10 years? And what's interesting about this was it was the same government. It was the Conservatives all the way through. So even within a party, they can immediately just change what they do. There is no, or appears to be, no long-term, robust strategy for taking the country, and by default, taking groups of countries, regions, and taking the globe forward. There's no agreement on what does good look like. And good doesn't necessarily mean me having everything. You know, you look at the Scandinavian model, they are some of the happiest countries in the world, their people, and they have some of the lowest levels of difference between rich and poor that there is. You know, they have strong equality, strong views on how people should work and act in a social network, and they're the happiest people. So we have to ask ourselves, what is the objective? Is it acquisition of wealth or quality of life? And, you know, if we've got a few days to debate that one, I'm sure we could have a good time. So from a political...
I'm very sure that we could, and I think a lot of people are really questioning a lot of things about that right now, in terms of how we are approaching society right now. I'm just gonna, if it's okay with you, and pivot back to a few more, just because sometimes we do need to look at this environment in this philosophical context of how countries approach things. I really think it's quite important, because we are seeing a real disparity right now in terms of the global approach to dealing with this, in terms of which countries have responded very quickly, which aren't. And then that has a real impact actually then on global supply chains going forward, because we're looking at how they're going to respond to on their messaging around trade. So that social political aspect is equally important, because that's going to influence, I think, where countries are going to go going forward on this. But I want to ask you a couple of practical questions, if that's okay with you. What is going to happen with the state of global contracts, particularly around force majeure clauses post-COVID? Because this is a minefield right now.
It is. We're already starting to see an effect there, in where contracts are going is they're deliberately starting to exclude disruptions and put all of the responsibility